When she stops speaking, his soul starts screaming. At first, he doesn't even notice it. The quiet seems like relief. The messages that once demanded attention vanish. The voice that once pulled him into meaning no longer calls his name. He thinks he is free. But freedom quickly turns hollow when silence takes the shape of an abyss, and he realizes it is not her absence of words that haunts him. It is the absence of himself reflected back in her. You know this wound too well. You wait by the phone, staring at a screen that refuses to light up, feeling the air turn heavier each hour. You imagine him laughing somewhere else, answering someone else, and the sound echoes in your skull like a ghost. You scroll through old conversations looking for a clue, but all you find is the hollow outline of a woman who begged for recognition. The ache is not just about him. It is about the fracture inside you, the piece that still whispers you are not enough. Jung would call this the shadow wound, the unspoken hunger that drags you into the arms of those who confirm your invisibility. His silence is not just his choice. It is the mirror reflecting the silence you carry within, the part of you that swallowed your own voice long before he ignored your call. And this is why the hurt burns deeper than rejection. You are not only grieving him, you are grieving the girl inside you who never learned her worth was not negotiable. But here is the paradox that shakes the ground beneath him. When you finally withdraw, when your words cease to orbit his world, he finds himself facing an unbearable storm. He cannot name it, yet he cannot escape it. Because your silence is not passive, it is alive. It becomes a force that presses on his chest in the dead of night. He hears it between the tick of the clock and the rattle of his own breath. Silence, once taken for granted, now devours him. The archetype rising here is the dark feminine, the one men fear and desire in equal measure. She is not cruel, she is not vindictive, she is simply sovereign. Like Lilith, she walks away from Eden when the terms of love demand her submission. And in that departure, she leaves behind not emptiness, but a vacuum that pulls at the soul of the man who thought her devotion was endless. What terrifies him is not that you spoke too much. What terrifies him is that you have nothing left to say. You feel this shift inside. The moment you stop explaining, stop defending, stop sending paragraphs he never deserved, you feel the click of your heels against the cold marble of your own authority. Each step away from him is not silence at all, but a new sound, the sound of your becoming. And yet the part of you still wounded fears this power. It whispers, what if he forgets you entirely? But listen closer. He cannot forget the woman who embodies absence like a crown. Because silence, when worn by the awakened woman, is not emptiness. It is a roar without sound. He remembers your laughter echoing through his chest. He remembers the heat of your gaze when you looked at him as if he were the only man alive. He remembers the trembling breath you released against his shoulder. But now, in your quiet, he also remembers the one thing he had hoped never to face, that he was never enough for himself, and he used your love to cover that void. This is why he begins to unravel. Alone at night, he reaches for the phone, then stops. Pride keeps his hand frozen, yet desperation gnaws at his bones. He wonders where you are, whose gaze now drinks the nectar of your attention. He tries to convince himself he doesn't care, but the hollow silence answers back. He cannot drown it with music, cannot fill it with another's laughter, cannot numb it with meaningless bodies. The silence keeps screaming, and the scream is his own soul. For you, this is not the end. This is the threshold. The high priestess whispers at your shoulder, teaching restraint, teaching the alchemy of patience. She reminds you that silence is not about punishment, it is about alignment. It is the sacred pause where you re-enter yourself, gather your fragments, and sit upon the throne of your own stillness. Only from that place can you choose, not react, not beg, but choose. Will you invite him back into your orbit? Or will you let him orbit endlessly around a sun he can never again touch? But before you decide, there is one more descent to make. You must face the echo inside, the place where your own silence once felt like shame. That shadow still lingers, tempting you to break it with frantic words, to rush into explanation, to collapse your power into the comfort of noise. The challenge is not him. The challenge is holding your quiet long enough for it to transform into music he cannot bear to live without. And yet, what if the scream that now tears through his nights is not only about you, but about something deeper, something ancient, something he was never ready to face until you withdrew your voice? It begins as restlessness, the kind that coils in his stomach and burns through his chest. He tells himself he doesn't need you, that your silence is petty, that you are probably sulking. But the hours stretch into days, and the air around him grows denser, as though every breath costs more than the last. He catches his own reflection in a fractured mirror, and hardly recognizes the man staring back. What unnerves him is not the absence of your words. It is the way his own thoughts grow louder without them. In his mind, you were always a constant. The one who would check in, explain, forgive, bridge the gap. The one who softened the jagged edges of his indifference. But now, with you withdrawn, every sharp corner cuts into his skin. He finds himself rehearsing conversations that never happen, remembering the click of your heels as you walked away, the crimson silk of your dress left behind in his room, like a flag of conquest he no longer deserves to hold. He tries to dismiss it, yet the image clings, tormenting him more than any argument ever could. This is the cruel genius of silence. It awakens his shadow. He cannot escape it with distraction because silence is the one adversary he cannot dominate. A raised voice, a debate, even a fight, these are arenas where he knows the rules. But silence breaks all rules. It does not give him a foothold, does not let him claim victory. It forces him into the most dangerous confrontation of all with himself. And here in this hollow chamber, his soul begins to scream. But let us shift for a moment. Let us inhabit his voice, not the mask he wears in public, but the inner monologue he hides, the confession he cannot whisper aloud. Hear it, raw and trembling, like breath fogging a cold window in the dark. Why doesn't she answer? Why doesn't she chase me? She always chased. She always tried. Without her words, I don't know who I am anymore. Did she love me? Or did she simply mirror back the parts of me I wanted to believe were real? I can still smell her perfume on my jacket. I can still hear her laugh. God, that laugh. It made me think I was more than this hollow man. And now she's gone quiet. Now the silence makes me sick, like I'm rotting from the inside. I thought I didn't need her. I thought I wanted freedom, but freedom tastes like ash when no one is watching me. I hate her silence. I crave her silence. I cannot breathe without the sound of what isn't there. This is what he will never admit, but you feel it in the invisible threads tugging through the air. You sense his hunger without him speaking. And here lies your turning point. Do you break the quiet with mercy, or do you let it mature into power? Because the longer you stay in your stillness, the more his desperation reveals itself. The siren archetype rises in you now, not the caricature of temptation, but the deep embodiment of allure that comes from centeredness. The siren does not need to call out. Her very presence is enough. Her silence is not absence but invitation, pulling without pursuing. When you walk into a room, she guides your shoulders to stay back, your eyes to linger, your breath to slow. He feels it. Every man feels it. And suddenly, the one who thought he could ignore you realizes that silence has carved your image into the marrow of his bones. But this allure is dangerous if you do not wield it wisely. If you let it become a weapon, you will remain trapped in the cycle of wound and revenge. Jung warns of this shadow, the archetype distorted into manipulation rather than transformation. So you must ground it in truth. Silence is not about punishing him. Silence is about reminding yourself that your power does not live in words tossed into voids. Your power lives in restraint, in choosing when to speak and when not to. Consider the scene. You sit alone, candlelight flickering against cold marble walls. The room hums with stillness. You are not waiting, you are inhabiting. Your breath slows, your chest opens. In that moment, silence is no longer a lack. It is an atmosphere, a presence thicker than any voice. This is the moment you understand. Silence, when chosen, is sovereignty. And sovereignty is the one language men cannot counterfeit. He begins to break. You hear it in the scattered attempts, liking an old photo, sending a half-hearted message, appearing where he knows you might be. These are not signs of strength. They are fractures, small cracks in the mask he wore. He cannot name what is happening, but his body knows. His soul knows. The scream grows louder, clawing at the walls of his chest. He does not want to face that truth, but every minute of your quiet forces him closer. And yet, the story is not only about him. It is about you and the shadow you must integrate. Because if you mistake his desperation for proof of your worth, you fall back into the old wound. Worth is not measured by how loudly someone screams in your absence. Worth is measured by the way you hold yourself in presence. Why? Or without an audience. But the question lingers, pressing against your ribs like an unspoken heartbeat. When his soul finally collapses under the weight of your silence, will you answer? Or will you let the scream echo into eternity, while you rise into a throne he can no longer reach? Your silence has now become a storm, and storms never leave the landscape unchanged. He begins to spiral. At night, the hollow sound of his own apartment becomes unbearable. He turns on the television, the music, the chatter of strangers just to drown the echo. But no noise can substitute for what your absence has created. Every distraction collapses into static, and still, your silence spreads like ink through water, seeping into every corner of his mind. And yet here is the paradox. While his world is unraveling, yours is beginning to align. You wake to the same emptiness, but instead of panic, you start to notice the subtle weight of peace. You are no longer tethered to the constant cycle of reaction. The space he left becomes a canvas. Slowly, you rediscover the art of hearing your own voice without needing it to be validated by his ears. You light a candle. You watch the flame dance against the fractured mirror, and for the first time, the reflection does not haunt you. It invites you. This is the sacred turning. In Jung's language, individuation is not about rejecting others, but about integrating the pieces you once projected onto them. You realize that the reason his silence cut so deeply was not because he withdrew, but because you had given him the role of holding the parts of you that longed to be seen. He was not ignoring you. He was showing you where you had ignored yourself. And once you grasp this, the wound transforms. The shadow ceases to terrify. It becomes raw material for power. Still, the temptation lingers. You think of sending a message, of breaking the quiet with one small word. You imagine how quickly he would return, how desperate his voice would sound if you offered even a sliver of attention. But deep inside, you know, if you break the silence before it ripens, you will step back into the same cycle. You will become the rescuer of his emptiness, the filler of his void. And you have outgrown that role. The silence is not only his test, it is yours. So you wait, but not passively. You move through the world differently. In your crimson dress and the click of your heels across cold marble, you radiate an energy that needs no validation. Men notice. Women notice. Strangers turn their heads not because you speak, but because your silence carries an aura that cannot be ignored. This is how allure is born, not from effort, but from presence. You are no longer a voice begging to be heard. You are an atmosphere that demands reverence. And what of him? He cannot escape the pull. Each day he feels more of the weight pressing down. He recalls the way your laughter once echoed in his chest, the way your trembling breath once reminded him he was alive. Now without it, the world tastes like ash. He checks his phone, scrolling for your name, but the hollow screen refuses to light up. He sees your face in every crowd, hears your whisper in the silence between his thoughts. His pride is a crumbling fortress, and inside its walls, his soul screams like a caged animal. But you must be careful here. Power has its shadow. The siren's allure can intoxicate you as much as it intoxicates him. The danger is believing that his desperation is the victory you were seeking. That is not sovereignty, it is dependence in disguise. Real sovereignty is quieter, deeper, unshakable. It is the high priestess seated in her temple, unbothered whether the supplicant arrives with offerings or not. It is the flame that burns whether anyone watches or turns away. One evening, you enter a room where you know he will be. The air changes instantly. Conversations falter, eyes turn. He feels it before he sees you, the shift, the gravity. His body freezes, a cold sweat breaking across his skin. He dares to look, and there you are, not speaking, not demanding, simply existing with a presence that eclipses every word. In that moment, the silence between you becomes unbearable for him, but intoxicating for you. It is no longer emptiness, it is command. And still, the deeper question remains. Do you let him come closer? Or do you hold the silence, letting it sculpt his desperation into a lesson he will never forget? This is the razor's edge of empowerment, not revenge, not cruelty, but choice. Silence gives you back the ability to choose, to decide if he is worthy of stepping once more into your atmosphere, or if his scream will echo forever against the walls of his own hollow self. But there is a darker truth still waiting, one you have yet to face. His scream is not only his, it is the echo of a collective wound, the cry of countless men who mistake a woman's silence for punishment, when in truth it is initiation. And within you, the shadow still asks, what happens if you are not just silent to him, but silent to every version of yourself that ever begged, pleaded, or chased? That question lingers in the marrow, heavier than any heartbreak, because it is not only about him. It is about the ghost of the girl you once were, the one who sat by the window waiting for a message that never came. It is about the countless nights you rehearsed conversations in your head only to silence yourself at the moment of truth. That silence was not power. It was submission, a swallowing of your own flame. And now, as you stand in the glow of your chosen stillness, you realize the difference. His scream is not punishment, it is prophecy. Jung taught that the shadow, when denied, becomes a tormentor, but when embraced, it becomes a guide. Your silence has drawn his shadow into daylight. He cannot escape it, and neither can you. The echo of your old wound still scratches at the edges of your heart, but now, instead of running from it, you hold it. You let the trembling breath pass through you. You let the cold sweat on your palms remind you that you are alive. You allow the ache to be seen, not by him, but by yourself. And in that acknowledgement, the wound stops festering. It begins to bloom. You see it now. The archetypes were always inside you. The dark feminine rising not as vengeance, but as sovereignty. The siren shimmering not as manipulation, but as magnetic presence. The high priestess whispering wisdom, showing you that silence is a ritual, not a weapon. You no longer need his validation to feel complete, but ironically, it is now that he feels most incomplete without you. This is the inversion that terrifies him. Your stillness makes him unravel while it makes you whole. Picture him again, alone in his apartment, surrounded by noise yet pierced by quiet. He scrolls through pictures, pausing on the one where your eyes seem to peer straight through his chest. He remembers the weight of your gaze, how it made him feel exposed yet desired, judged yet forgiven. He wonders if he will ever feel that again. He picks up his phone, starts typing, erases, types again. Every word feels too small, too desperate. He curses under his breath, slams the device down, but minutes later his hand trembles back to it. This is not strength. This is surrender. And you are no longer chained to the outcome. You step into rooms not with expectation, but with presence. You sit in silence without needing to fill it. You wear your crimson silk not to be noticed, but because it feels like fire against your skin. The fractured mirror no longer reflects a broken woman, but a mosaic, a design born from every wound you survived. And in that design, there is beauty he cannot touch, no matter how loudly his soul screams. Yet silence has one more secret to reveal. It is not only a tool of separation, it is a crucible. In the hollow space it creates, new identities are forged. You are no longer the woman who begged, who explained, who overgave. You are becoming something else, something archetypal, something eternal. You are becoming the oracle of your own life, the one who listens not outward but inward, the one who no longer mistakes noise for love or absence for abandonment, the one who knows that presence begins in the self and radiates outward like a crown. And so when he finally breaks, when the scream inside him becomes unbearable and he reaches out, you will feel no rush, no collapse, no desperate relief. His words, however frantic, will not define you. His longing, however deep, will not complete you. You may answer or you may not, but either way you will remain sovereign, because the scream was never yours to carry. It was always his. And in the silence you chose, you gave him the mirror he could not avoid. But the story does not end with his desperation. It ends with your transformation. You return to the very place where it began, the waiting room, the unanswered messages, the cold marble floor. Only this time, you are no longer the woman waiting for him. You are the woman who has already arrived for herself. The silence that once suffocated now breathes life into your lungs. The wound that once chained you now births your crown. Still, there is one last question, rising like smoke from the flame of your new becoming. If silence can unravel him and empower you, what else might it awaken if you let it shape not only your relationships, but your destiny? Destiny is the word that pulses beneath all of this, because silence, once mastered, does not stop at the level of romance. It reshapes the way you stand in the world. The same quiet that makes his soul scream also unsettles every room you enter. People feel it before they understand it, the way your presence commands attention without demanding it. In a culture addicted to noise, your stillness is rebellion. And rebellion, when embodied by a woman, becomes prophecy. Think of how it began. Your silence was born. From pain, from rejection, from the ache of not being chosen. But now, it matures into something sacred. Jung described individuation as a circle, where the end always leads back to the beginning, transformed. You return to the wound not to collapse inside it, but to harvest its power. That empty chair at dinner is no longer a mark of your invisibility. It is a throne waiting to be claimed. He feels it too, even from afar. When you pass through his memory, it is no longer the desperate girl begging for scraps of attention. It is the woman who left the garden, who chose herself when he could not choose her. He dreams of you, though he does not admit it. He imagines the whisper of your name, the heat of your gaze, the tremor of your breath. But most of all, he hears the silence, the one that wraps around him like a shroud, forcing him to face what he has always feared, his hollowness without you. And here in this inversion lies the truth. His scream is not a punishment you inflict. It is a revelation he resists. You have become the archetypal mirror he cannot shatter. When he sees you now, whether in memory, in reality, or in the haunting quiet of his mind, he sees not only you, but the part of himself he abandoned. That is why he cannot bear it. That is why he obsesses. And that is why silence is not cruelty, but initiation. But what of you? You cannot live forever in the role of mirror. That is only one stage of your individuation. If you stop there, you remain defined by his scream, even if you hold the upper hand. Your true ascent is to move beyond him altogether, to take the power silence awaken and pour it into the architecture of your life. The question is not whether he breaks. The question is what you build from the space his absence left behind. So you begin. You listen not to him but to yourself. You notice the whispers that were always drowned out by noise, the desire to create, to travel, to stand in your truth without apology. You feel the weight of your gaze not only in the mirror but in the eyes of strangers who now see something luminous in you. And slowly you realize that silence is not a void at all. It is a womb. From it, new versions of you are born. And still, when he sees you again, his body betrays him. He thought time would numb it. He thought another could replace you. But when you enter, the air shifts and his breath falters. His chest tightens, his palms sweat, his soul claws at the walls of his ribs. You do not speak. You do not need to. The silence between you carries more weight than any speech. And he knows, without you saying a word, that he will never be the same man again. But here is the final paradox. The scream he carries, the unraveling he endures, is not the end of him either. Just as silence awakened you, it awakens him. Whether he admits it or not, whether he runs from it or faces it, the seed has been planted. He may collapse under the weight of the truth, or he may rise from it. That choice is his. What matters is that you have already chosen yours. The circle closes now. The silence that once suffocated you has become your crown. The wound that once defined you has become your initiation. You began as the woman waiting by the phone, trembling in shame. You rise as the woman whose very absence speaks louder than words. And yet, as the flame of this chapter flickers low, a new archetype stirs on the horizon, one you have not yet met, one who waits to carry you beyond silence into the song of your full becoming. But what name does this archetype carry? And what melody will she teach you to sing? The archetype that emerges now is not the dark feminine, not the siren, not even the high priestess who guided you through restraint. This one is different, transfigured. She is the phoenix, born of ashes, unafraid of death, blazing with a radiance that cannot be contained by silence or speech. The phoenix does not whisper. She does not scream. She burns, and in her fire, silence and sound alike are consumed into something higher. This is where your story ends and begins again. You return to the memory of the unanswered texts, the empty chair, the breathless panic of being unseen. But when you stand in that same place now, you carry fire in your chest. The silence that once swallowed you becomes fuel, rising as smoke and flame. You see the same absence that once cut like a knife, and instead of collapsing, you ignite. This is the circular path of individuation, back to the wound, but no longer broken by it. Picture it clearly. You enter a room. He is there, eyes wide, chest tight, unable to breathe under the weight of everything unsaid. The air is thick with history, with the echoes of your past desperation. But you do not falter. You do not rush to fill the silence. You carry it as a mantle. Your gaze is steady, your breath calm, your very presence a conflagration he cannot endure and cannot escape. In that moment, his soul screams not because you are gone, but because you are fully here, untouchable, sovereign, burning with your own radiance. This is the final transformation, silence into song, shadow into flame. What once chained you to his indifference now liberates you into your own power. You understand now that silence was never about him. It was about the voice inside you waiting to be born. And as you rise, you no longer ask if he notices, if he regrets, if he aches. Because the phoenix does not live for echoes. She lives for fire. And so the circle closes. You began with his silence, trembling in invisibility. You walked through the shadow, through the echo of your own suppressed voice. You wore silence as a crown, watched as his soul screamed beneath the weight of your absence. And now, you emerge not as the woman defined by his scream, but as the phoenix who carries her own flame. The silence has done its work. The wound has become your womb. The fire has become your freedom. Let him scream. Let him ache. Let him crumble under the silence he never understood. His scream is his initiation, not your burden. Your silence is no longer a void. It is your power, your altar, your throne. And from that throne you rise, not to return to him, not to punish him, but to embody yourself fully. You are no longer the woman who waits. You are the woman who burns. And as you step into this new horizon, one truth glows brighter than all the rest. When she stops speaking, his soul may start screaming. But when she starts burning, the whole world listens.